Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for attending and welcome. This is the overview of beginning and lower school program, and it's one of many events that we are hosting this month throughout October for our Connect with Catlin. Thank you so much for attending. This session will be recorded and will live on the website in a few days, and you can watch it again if you'd like to, or for families who are not able to attend to watch it as well. I also want to acknowledge that we would much rather be in person right now, and this is a chance when our open house is when we welcome our outer community onto campus and share our learning spaces and talk about Catlin Gable. And this feels really different. I just want to acknowledge that. So thank you for engaging with us in this virtual way. So thank you for coming. And my name is Zoe Edelin Hare, and I am the Director of Beginning and Lower School Enrollment. And I'd like to go over the agenda for tonight. So the next slide, Sarah, please. Thank you. After I give a brief welcome, I'll talk about some details, some quick facts of beginning and lower school. And then Tim Bazemore, our head of school, will give opening remarks. And then about 6:40, we're going to have a roundtable discussion with Don Isaacs, the head of the beginning and lower school, Genevieve Bowis, the assistant head of the lower school, and Isaac Enlow, the assistant head of the beginning school. And then around 7:10, we'll have a Q&A. However, at any time during the roundtable discussion, you would like to have your question posed, please do so in the chat, which is at the bottom of the screen. All the questions will go to the panelists, and during the Q&A, I will be reading all the questions during the roundtable, and then I will be sort of joining them together to pose questions to the leadership team as we talk about the beginning and lower school. And at 7:30, we'll wrap up and thank everyone for attending. And I'll also go over some of the other events that we're offering in October as well. All right, next slide. All right, so Catlin Gable School. We are a progressive independent day school located in Southwest Portland. We have 6 to 7 acres on our campus. It's a beautiful campus. This picture in the slide is the Fir Grove, where students play during recess. And it's about 5 miles west of downtown Portland. So it's about a 10-minute drive into downtown from our campus. We are a grades preschool through 12th grade school. And so we have 778 students attending. Families represent 56 different zip codes, and families hold citizenships from 25 different countries. Families speak 41 different languages, and 28% of our families receive financial assistance, and 45% identify as people of color. Our mission: Catlin Gable fosters curious and compassionate citizens of the world by inspiring in every student a love of learning and the courage to take responsible action. Our values are inclusion, integrity, and kindness. At our beginning and lower school, our enrollment numbers are here. There are 20 students in preschool. In our kindergarten, we have 38 students. So that means we have 2 homerooms in kindergarten. And then in lower school, there's 212 students. In lower school, we mean grades 1 through 5. The class size range is between 18 to 23 students, and specifically in a homeroom with a lead teacher and an assistant teacher in each of those homerooms. And the largest class, 23, is going to be in either 4th or 5th grade. And the areas of instructions from our teachers and specialists include math, literacy, and social studies, as well as science, language. Starting in 1st grade, we offer Mandarin or Spanish, music, art, wellness, which is our PE program, woodshop, as well as technology and digital citizenship, which is especially important when students are in 4th and 5th grade and can start communicating via email. And then library and research skills as well with our librarian. We have a library that's dedicated to beginning and lower school. And then additional support from a math specialist, counselor, learning specialist, literacy specialist, and of course our before and after school staff. And so that is the general overview of some quick facts from beginning and lower school. And now I would like to hand it off to Tim Bazemore, our head of school, for opening remarks.
Thank you very much, Zoe, and good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for your interest in Catlin Gable School, and thank you specifically for joining us to learn more about the beginning and lower school tonight. We appreciate having you here. And as Zoe said, we wish we were in person, but here we are on Zoom. If you hear my dog barking in the background, please excuse him and me for that. Thank you. At Catlin, we believe that all children have endless potential to learn, to develop their talents, and to effect positive change. It's here in school and also, frankly, in the world. Our goal is to provide a transformational education and unrivaled academic and character development in a school where being smart and being kind and being responsible is appreciated and expected and taught. So today I want to share, or tonight, I guess, I want to share a few thoughts on what makes Catlin Gable different than other schools. So we mentioned the school's mission and values, which certainly inform who we are, both academically and as school culture. I'm going to share with you 4 principles of progressive education that really are organizing or design principles for our curriculum, for our culture, for our community, for all the activities we have at the school. And they're just as true in preschool as they are in 6th grade or in 12th grade at Catlin Gable. So they inform everything we do at the school. The first principle of progressive ed that we believe in is that we teach the whole student. You know, as parents, I know as a parent that our kids thrive when they feel known and feel valued. And every child brings a unique combination and blend of intellectual and social, emotional, physical potential to school each and every day. Extraordinary teachers in small classes partnering with you allows us to know your kids very well and to help them achieve their potential. We're an inclusive community where kindness is valued and all voices count, where students do feel a sense of belonging, and where we practice not only kindness, but we also combat racism at our school as well. Students are classmates with friends that they care about, and then ultimately, eventually become an alumni group that form a powerful personal and professional network for the rest of their lives. Another principle that informs our work here is that we value the experience of learning, because we believe the value of education is not just in knowing a lot of things, it's in doing things with what you know, applying what you know to do good in the world. So we try to design experiences very intentionally for your children that require them to think, to hypothesize, to try out ideas in real life, and to reflect on what they've learned and maybe what they need to learn next or how they're going to do it differently next time. And that's true across every experience they'll have in the Beehive, which is our preschool building and kindergarten building, and the lower school, and frankly, through all the grades at Catlin. We want kids here to develop the courage to take on new experiences and novel experiences with confidence, and to be adaptable thinkers who can learn anywhere. That's one of our goals. We want them to be able to learn here on our campus, online, in Portland, in the wilderness, all over the world, frankly. A third principle of progressive ed that we believe in and value is that we are inquiry-based. We value asking questions. Questions drive the learning here. And we want kids to develop an independent point of view. So expert teachers here use questions to inspire learning and challenge students to think more deeply and more personally. What do you think? How did you solve that? Why do you think that? What happens next? What else do you need to know? Who else can help you? We teach our kids to be curious and open-minded and to actively engage, and we want them to speak up. From preschool to 3rd grade to 7th grade to 10th grade, whether they're in a literacy session or they're in a math class, or frankly, they're in a basketball practice or a community service event, we want kids to ask questions, to be curious about different points of view, to be confident in their answers, and especially important, this starts with our 4-year-olds, we want them to know that their voices and their ideas matter in the world and have value. And the fourth organizing principle for progressive education at Catlin Gable is a critical one, particularly perhaps today, and that is that we educate for democracy. We believe education has purpose beyond self-interest. It's to improve society. So we teach students about political, economic, and social systems and power and privilege, beginning with 4-year-olds at Catlin Gable School. We want them to grow up, frankly, to be skeptical of conventional wisdom and to value personal and public integrity. Catlin Gable kids have the will and they have the skills to advocate for themselves and to advocate for others and influence our world. And they gain experience and purpose through practicing those democratic principles in their classrooms, on campus, and in our community as well. They learn at Catlin that a healthy democracy depends on empathy, compassion, and taking responsible action. So those are 4 principles that guide everything we do at our school. We know and value every student, we teach through experience and inquiry, and we actively engage kids on a daily basis in learning democratic practices and principles. The result is these are accomplished graduates who can leave here with confidence to really take on the world. And we really believe that that's what their next educational experience will look for in terms of colleges and universities. We think that's what employers seek in their employees. We think that's what our future needs. We think that's what education can be. And that's what we're aspiring to do here at Catlin Gable. So thanks for listening. I look forward to hearing the questions and answers as we go through this next hour or so together. And I'm happy to hand the microphone over to our wonderful head of beginning and lower school, Dawn Isaacs.
Thank you, Tim, and thank you, Zoe. It's so great to be with everyone tonight. I was especially enjoying those pictures of campus at the beginning. That is my favorite, the dappled sunlight through the fir grove and children playing there. And always when it's happening, I just feel so grateful for that children are having that experience. So it was good to open up with those images today. I want to just launch this roundtable portion here by having me and Genevieve and Isaac introduce ourselves and just tell a little bit of our journey of how we came to Catlin Gable and why we chose Catlin Gable to be a place where we're doing our work. This is my 10th year at Catlin Gable, my 6th in a leadership role here, and my 3rd as the head of the beginning and lower school. I also taught in the lower school for 4 years before stepping into leadership. And I started my career a long time ago now when I was 22. I started teaching right away after undergrad in Burbank Unified School District in Southern California, where I taught for a few years before then moving to St. Louis and teaching in an independent school there. And then I moved to Key West, Florida, where I taught in a couple of charter schools, took some time to teach English as a second language in Costa Rica, lived aboard a sailboat for a while off the grid, and then made my way here to Portland. And you know, I've always had a very strong vision for what I thought school and education could be for elementary age children and early childhood. And I came to Catlin Gable because it was being actualized here. And it was a place where I could work and be according to my values as an educator, where young children really are valued and held, and their capability is believed in. And that continues to be true, and it makes being here exciting every day. So Isaac, could you introduce yourself, and then we'll have Genevieve.
Sure, thanks, Don. And hi, everybody. It's good to be here with you. I'm Isaac Enlow. I'm the assistant head of the beginning school. And I started my teaching career actually as a student teacher in the 2000-2001 school year here at Catlin Gable in the 5th grade, and went off and taught at a number of progressive schools on the West Coast and overseas in Japan before coming back. And I always wanted to come back, and I'll tell you why in a second. I taught here for 7 years, and then in kindergarten mostly, and I also spent a year in the 1st through 5th grade as a science teacher, which was just an amazing experience. And now this is my 3rd year as an administrator. So I grew up in Hiroshima, Japan until I was 11, and I went to a very small progressive international school that had about 80 students. It was a place where you felt known, where children's voices were heard and honored. It was just a wonderful place. And when we moved back to the States, I went just to my local middle school and high school, which was, 750 kids in the middle school, 2,000 in the high school. And I just had just in the contrast to my experience as a child, just a really difficult time. And when I came to Catlin Gable that first time as an intern and stepped onto campus, it was like, oh, this is it. This is what I grew up with. The kids here, the teachers here are sort of carrying that culture and that flame. And it's what continues to draw me to being at this school.
Right. I'm Genevieve Bowis, and I'm the assistant head of the lower school. And I've been in this position for 9 years now. And I really love my role. I get to work in thought partnership with amazing thinkers like Dawn and Isaac. And I also get to work with teachers, and I get to work with students, and I get to do things like help them solve conflicts. And I love that. I have worked in a variety of different settings. I've worked in charter schools and public schools and other independent schools. And I've taught 2nd through 5th grade, and I've been in leadership positions preschool through 12th grade. And I'm at Catlin for all the reasons that you've already heard, but I will also speak as a parent. I have 2 children here, and my children have been so fortunate to be in a remote learning situation where they continue to be engaged. They are still curious, and they're feeling connected. They come to school every day on their own. They come to school. They log on to school every day by themselves, and they're never absent. And I never have to tell them to get out of bed. They are there. They are hungry for it. And I get to hear their teachers, and I am so impressed with the teaching that's happening here. I really believe in progressive education, and it's embodied here. And for me, that means that students are at the center, and they're at the center of everything we do. And that just feels really right to me as an educator and as a human. So I feel very fortunate to be a part of this community.
Thanks, Genevieve. So, so building off of that, I thought we could talk a bit, and Tim, you join in this too. Just what about Catlin Gable is unique? What makes Catlin Gable special or different from other schools?
The first thing that always comes to mind is just the quality and the depth of the relationships here. The community that we have, and I'm speaking broadly about parents, students, faculty, staff. It's one of mutual support and interconnectedness, and just really striving to connect in kindness and care for one another. It's wonderful.
I would build on that and say, we don't expect perfection, it's all about growth. And I really appreciate, it feels very honoring of childhood that kids are allowed to make mistakes and they're allowed to learn from them. And they're then, through that grace, they're allowed to extend that to others. And so I feel like empathy is really valued. So I feel like we really spend a lot of time focusing on emotional needs, and that gets to be at the heart of what we do.
Mm-hmm. I often think that we think of that we really honor childhood and like really realize and acknowledge how fleeting it is, that this time preschool through 5th grade, it's 7 years, but that goes really fast. Mm-hmm. And there isn't a rushing of it at Catlin Gable. I think it's very joyful, and I think most good schools strive to be really joyful, but also we're really like working to hold that time and to let it be in its fullness. And I really appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
And I would just add, this is my 7th year as the head of school at Catlin, and part of what drew me here is still very much the case, and I feel it every day. There's a tangible dynamism at the school. You bring together this incredible group of talented, creative, imaginative, experienced teachers, and you give them a chance to be creative with their curriculum. You have them work with kids who have tremendous potential and are a very diverse group of kids. And then you also add in, frankly, a group of parents and guardians who are generally high achievers in their professions, in a wide range of professions. It creates an incredible sense of energy and enthusiasm, and inventiveness, an innovative kind of atmosphere at the school, which I think captures kids' imagination and attention and is highly engaging and motivating for them. So there's this dynamism on campus, which I think is very special and very rare, frankly.
Mm-hmm. You know, so connecting to what Tim said, then let's talk a little bit about some of the things that we're working on right now in the beginning and lower school. Some of the new things that are happening.
Well, something that I'm really appreciating that we're doing right now is trying to integrate our specialist teachers into our homeroom time so that we have integrated projects and connecting questions that all students are exploring preschool through 5th grade. And to see that come together right now in this remote environment has been really great. The kids are very excited to be in those classes, and it's allowed things to be more hands-on, even though we are remote. And so that has been an exciting beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We had a schedule that was really pretty traditional in that, you know, children would go to specialists as very separate and discrete subjects. And so, you know, would go to art and do art there, and go to science and do science there, and go to woodshop. And it's been part of our strategic initiatives for a while to really work to make things more interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary, and to have teachers and kids working in more collaborative ways that would help children see the whole. And so something I'm proud of is that, you know, we're in a remote teaching environment right now. And when we were considering how we were going to launch this year remotely, we decided it was also an opportunity. We had a need and an opportunity to make a shift in the way teachers were working and kids were working together, because it wasn't going to be sustainable to have that kind of traditional schedule in a remote environment. And it had been something we've been working towards for a while. So I've been proud of our innovation and our steps forward, even in a time of a bit of a emergency of needing to think about how we were going to adapt teaching and learning during the pandemic.
And part of the opportunity that the pandemic provided of being remote from each other was these overarching questions that all of the children preschool through 5th grade are wrestling with as a way to sort of connect students who are separated geographically right now to be thinking about and wondering about the same broad overarching questions. And I think that does have a lot of value in this current climate, but I'm excited to see, you know, what that could be like when we're back together on campus again. I think there's a lot of benefit to still be having some questions that we're wondering about together.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We have these inquiry arcs going throughout the year that are based on 3 provocations. So the first one is people, and then next we'll study place, and then purpose. I'm really thinking about how are you taking responsible action and making an impact with your knowledge.
And I was just going to add on that something we knew that we wanted to be central to our work was taking care of our social emotional needs. And this arc in this process has really allowed that to be at the center. And so that's been guiding our questions. And it's also been allowing us to put inclusivity at the center through our curriculum. And it's being woven through these arcs. And so that feels exciting to find a way to bring all these pieces together that we have valued and been working on for so long.
Mm-hmm. Is there an example from a classroom or a project?
Well,
from the people arc that's been
one arc I've been or one project that I've been thinking about. Well, there's a few, but okay, I'll think one that that I have been thinking about is 5th grade. They have been considering this idea of peace and what creates peace for people and what is the feeling of peace. And so first they experienced that and studied that for themselves. And they thought about that through different cultures, like where would you find peace in nature? And something that they found that was universal was the stars in the sky. Mm-hmm. And so they took that opportunity and considered what the constellations are and who created them and whose perspective was that. And are they the same for everybody? What else could they be? You know, so, you know, considering those different perspectives. And then the phase that they're on now is how can they create a peaceful experience for someone else in incorporating that night sky. So I saw some of their projects today, and one was a project that a student created for their mom, where they can look inside, and they've created this set of constellations, and there's a special name for the constellations for her mom, and there's music that goes along with it. But everybody has a different project, but it's thinking of how can we, what can we do for others, and considering the perspective of the person they're giving that to, mm-hmm. You know, what will they need and what will help them feel peace.
The building of the empathy there mm-hmm. is incredible. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. You know, the preschool actually has a similar project in the sense of like thinking about others in relation to self. So right now, you know, our preschoolers are the group of students who are on campus, while our other students are remote. And so, you know, with this question of, you know, who am I and who are we that they're exploring, a lot of that is in the context of getting to know each other and as being at school, you know, at the beginning of the year. But they've begun to develop this identity in this sense of we are the ones here who are taking care of this campus for people who aren't here. And so how can we share what's happening now? And so this week, they had gone and explored campus and collected all of these beautiful fall leaves. And the provocation was, you know, they got into this idea of how can we capture and share this beauty that the other people are missing right now who aren't here. And so they had all of these ideas of making signs. So this week they painted all of these leaves and wrote messages, and with the woodshop teacher, they made these out of wood, and they're going to put stakes in them, and then they're going to hide them all around campus in different places so that when people come back to campus, they can discover them and like see that beauty that they captured.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I've been struck by some work that kindergarten has been doing where, you know, really central to what we know about young children is the importance of play, how much learning happens for children through play, both their, you know, academic development, but also and centrally their social emotional development, and how during this time that has been something that's difficult, is to really have young children engaging in play in the way that we would want for them now. And so as part of the people inquiry, kindergarten has really focused on a study of play, and in particular, you know, what does it mean, you know, what does kindness look like, and what does, you know, not being kind look like? How can you identify that in play? How can you act in a kind way? And one of the activities they did was to watch an Angry Birds little video short where the birds are being both kind and unkind, and to, you know, watch it in small bits and then have the kids identify when they were seeing moments of kindness or not kindness in the ways that they made them feel. I was struck by Mimi, the teacher, during the lesson, you know, the kids would react all of a sudden when there was a moment of unkindness, and she would say, oh, I see a lot of big emotion. Okay, I see a lot of big emotion right now. We'll stop here. Let's talk about what you're seeing. So they had that kind of mini lesson portion of it. And then they had time to, you know, really free play in Zoom, and, you know, they're getting things from their bedrooms and putting on dress up and as best they can as kindergartners, really, really playing still. Some of what we were talking about had me thinking about educating for democracy, which Tim mentioned as one of our tenets of progressive education. I'm wondering if we could talk about some examples of educating for democracy.
Mhm.
Sure. One thing that I really appreciate and that I really think is super important is really embracing conflict. And, you know, as humans, we always are going to experience conflict. And I think what we try to think about is, what do you do when conflict arises, and perspective taking, and you know, how do you manage yourself, but then how do you take perspective and understand from others what they need in a situation. And so that often comes up at recess. And one example that comes to mind, we have a gaga ball pit, which is at different times of the year with different groups of kids, it can be a real hot playground topic or option. And at one point there were a lot of kids who weren't following the rules, and it's a game where you really have to be honest, you know, which is an important part of democracy. And so they were having a real struggle with that integrity. And so students came and worked with adults and myself, and really wanted to come up with a way to make that better so that we could support each other with integrity. And so one thing they decided was that we needed to clarify the rules. And so they went around this small group, they decided what the rules should be. They simplified them because we knew that we had different ages and we needed to make it as simple as possible so that everybody could follow the same rules. And they came up with different days that they could play different versions of the game, and we posted those. And then different students took turns being refs. So they would go out and they were the ones who were reffing the game. And they were really trying to do it in a way of modeling good sportsmanship and making sure that people understood the rules. And it was pretty successful. I mean, I think, you know, it's something that requires a lot of ongoing work. And, you know, developmentally, sometimes it's also a little harder to want to get out of the game. But anyway, that was a time that comes to mind. There's a lot of recess examples that I think help students start to become citizens of the world.
I appreciated when you introduced yourself, Genevieve. You said about how a lot of times you're helping kids through conflict and how much you like that. And I think that's one way that we're educating for democracy, right? Is the embracing of that it's messy, that, you know, living in a democratic society means you're living with people who are different than you, and you're rubbing up against like how their ideas and perspectives are different than yours, which is going to create conflict. And that, you know, we really don't see conflict as something that is inherently bad, but something that needs to be, you know, leaned into and learned from, and learn. And so your example too is a good example of messy conflict.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have to lean into it because, you know, we have that value that children are full members of their communities and full citizens now. And so that education for democracy isn't about preparing for them to become citizens at the end of a road, but in what ways right now are they citizens of their classroom, school, and wider communities, and how do we support them in that? And part of that's the conflict resolution, but there's also the ways in which, you know, students have voice in the school, genuine, authentic voice in helping to create agreements in the classroom, for example, or, you know, we're working on creating a student council type opportunity for, you know, to consult with students in the beginning and lower school. I also, you know, was thinking about the ways, you know, those structures that we have in place to support students and educate them for democracy, but also the ways in which we're responsive to students as things arise. And like, I'll let you talk about, you know, Theo and that recent student who talked to you, Don, but I immediately flashed on a couple of years ago, a group of second graders wanted to organize a Catlin Gable group at the March for Science. And you know, the school responded by putting them in touch with, it was with me, but, you know, with a teacher who could support them in organizing that and considering all of the implications of it and coming up with a proposal to run by the head of the lower school, et cetera. So yeah, and then I've been thinking a lot about Theo recently.
Sure. Theo's a fifth grader who is concerned about climate change and wanted to take some kind of tangible action. And so he created t-shirts that say, "Your vote, my future." And he's selling the t-shirts to friends and family of his, and then donating the funds to Eco Trust, you know, an organization working towards the things that are important to Theo. And he contacted me because he wanted to talk about how he could share his work out with a wider community. So we met and had a conversation, and you know, we talked about how you know, he couldn't, you know, sell the t-shirts to classmates or be really, you know, trying to get people to vote for a particular person, but for sure he could be sharing with all of us the importance of acknowledging climate change and working towards solutions, and the importance of getting out the vote, you know. And so, and he said what was most important to him was that he wanted to really be inspiring other people, and that everybody has, you know, some kind of cause that they can feel strongly about. And so that he hoped that by sharing the cause that was important to him and the really clear action he was taking, other kids will also, you know, take that action. And so he'll be presenting his project at an upcoming community meeting. And you know, the thing is about Catlin Gable is that, I mean, that happens every year, those types of things multiple times throughout the year, where children are taking really clear steps towards things they believe in ways that are inspiring to other people. And I think really that that agency they have and the belief they have in the power of their ideas is a real thing.
Don, I just want to chime in with a couple of different kind of examples, because I think it's important that the adults are modeling democratic practices and principles as well. And I want to give credit to Don as a leader, and to Genevieve, Don, and Isaac, who are thinking of ways to distribute responsibility and authority for decision making, not only amongst them as a leadership team, but among teachers as well, and empowering the teachers who are closest to the kids in the program to have some authority and responsibility for making decisions, which is important. And I also want to note as an institution that parents and guardians are invited into decision-making at the school as well. You know, whether it's the strategic planning process or anti-racism efforts and activities at the school, it's important that parent and guardian voices are, you know, are part of how we make decisions at the institution. You know, we are in partnership together on behalf of your children. And so it's essential your voices are part of the mix as well.
Mm-hmm. I was going to add that, you know, really that idea of really embracing and seeking to create this community that is diverse and inclusive, that is a big part of the work that we're doing, is having students understand how to be in a diverse community and how to be with people who are different than themselves, and still understand how to respect that, learn how to engage and to be curious about what's different, what's the same. And I think we do that from the very beginning. And so that to me is, you know, that foundation of being in a democratic society.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. We have a couple minutes before we'll go to a broader Q&A, and we touched on some examples, but before we do that, could we give a couple of examples of what we mean by experiential learning, and what are some?
Sure. One of my favorite ways to, you know, think about experiential learning is it's this iterative cycle where, you know, students are engaged in direct experience, and then reflecting on their experience and generating ideas, and then experimentation, you know, not necessarily in that order, but over and over again. And one of the things that fascinates me is that cycle can happen on kind of a macro scale, like over the course of a long-term project, for example, but it's also happening throughout the day in individual lessons. So, you know, in terms of an example of a larger project, some kindergartners last year with Mimi, did a research project on animals and in a specific habitat, different animals that share a habitat. And they got into research pairs and they did research and gathered their materials. But then what they did with their research is they created in the dramatic play area an entire habitat where they could go and become those animals and play as those animals. And through that play, they're re-engaging with those ideas and sharing them with others. So they were teaching each other and learning from each other, and also just constructing their own meaning based on their research through that experience. And then, so that's sort of a macro, example. And then when I go into classrooms right now and look at like the workshop model that we use for literacy and math, you're seeing, a teacher giving a short sort of mini lesson at the beginning, maybe introducing a skill or a concept, and then the students have time to muck around with that with materials and get in there with the ideas. And then there might be a midpoint check-in where they're doing some reflection and some sharing, and the teacher is prodding them a little further, and then they go back into that process again.
Mhm.
And then at the end, they wrap it all up. So there's just, that's just within 45-minute to an hour-long class. Yeah.
And happening now while we're remote too.
While we're remote,
Correct?
yeah. And they're getting hands-on, they're getting out their math materials that they have as a kit. And yeah.
That the example I was going to share is in 3rd grade. They've been thinking about what's your story and how do, like, what's my story and how do I tell my story, and working to understand that. And they've built puppets of themselves with the woodshop teacher as they're doing that and studying story and telling their stories. But then they're now asking the question, how do I see others and how do they tell their stories, and how can stories change? So, thinking about themselves first, it's a nice way then they can expand beyond that and continue to connect and consider those stories of individuals and then also of culture, which is where they're headed next.
Nice. Thank you. All right. Zoe, we'll direct it back towards you to ask some questions from the group here.
Wonderful. Some great questions are coming in from our attendees. There was a question that was, it may have already been answered, but I wanted to ask it again to get maybe into the specifics of how it's playing out in the beginning and lower school. And so the question is, how are you creating a culture of inclusion in relation to everything going on inside and outside of Portland, and it relates to social unrest and social justice? And specifically, what conversations and forums are being created so that students can talk and address these issues together with guidance from teachers?
Genevieve, did you?
Go ahead.
I mean, so I think at its foundation are the ways that we're always working to create and form community, right? So those have always been true and are even probably more important now with so much sort of discord in the wider world. But the importance of that is true every year, and is always very intentional, the ways in which teachers are forming relationships between themselves and helping between themselves and students, and helping students form relationships, with each other. And again, a lot of it, I think, happens in those small moments where we're not looking at difference as something, or conflict as something that is bad and should be avoided, but as looking for those moments that are teaching moments that we can lean into, where we can develop those skills of listening to someone who is thinking about something very differently than we are, and being able to build those skills of empathy, to hear their perspective, and take that into consideration in your own actions. So it happens, in countless ways, and in those small moments, throughout the day. Isaac and Genevieve, do you have something to add to that part?
I think that, also trying to consider where possible, and developmentally where possible, just the idea of power and privilege, and weaving that throughout conversations and studies. And, maybe that language isn't the exact language that's used, but it's definitely perspectives that are considered and that students consider. And then we also do things that are maybe more identifiable. Like we have terms that we're teaching students and our inclusion terms, and we're making sure that kids understand what this means. And then also we do have affinity groups and opportunities for students to talk in different types of groupings throughout the week.
Right. I was thinking about the work we're doing with the terms too. So as a school, a few years ago, we articulated definitions to different terms around diversity and inclusion and equity and what we mean by those words like racism or prejudice or anti-racism. And so what our school counselor, Stephen, together with some other folks has done is to create kid-friendly definitions for those terms. And then we're going to be, introducing them and rolling them out throughout the school year through our community meetings and teachers weaving it into instruction and moments in their classroom. Because, one of the important pieces is that we have common ways to be able to talk about things too, because some of these conversations are not easy to have or would be easier to not have. And if we have some common vocabulary and frameworks, then we'll be better equipped to have the conversations.
We were also, back to what you were saying, Genevieve, about criticality and that lens, I think that's something I'm really proud of and excited about this year is, we were really inspired by the work of Dr. Goldie Muhammad this summer. And she, believes that, how to put this? Well, Don, feel free to jump in and save me. But that, rich learning, needs to touch on identity, like a sense of who you are and in your relationship to others, and the intellect and teach skills, but should also has this component of criticality and engaging with questions of power and privilege. And so, this year, we've really been supporting the teachers and asking them as they're designing these inquiry units and around these inquiry arcs to plan, intentionally around how this lens of criticality is going to be a part of each of these units.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for those responses. This is a good segue to the next question, which is about how curriculum is designed. And so you've mentioned the inquiry arcs, and the question is, how are students encouraged to be intrinsically motivated to design and execute their own projects, yet also encouraged to have broad-based literacy in math and reading, for example? So how do we set our benchmarks or our standards?
So, broadly and zoomed out, we consult things like the Common Core standards and other national and state standards to make sure that we're aligning our curriculum, accordingly. And, we have a lot of freedom to be designing curriculum also. We also, for literacy and for math, we do use a curriculum to help us have a spine and have cohesion and coherence, across the grades. So for literacy, we're using the units of study, which come out of the Teachers College at Columbia. And then for math, we're using illustrative mathematics, which has a well-established curriculum for middle and upper school. And this is their first year with an elementary program. And we're just really excited about the ways it is problem-based and constructivist and really has an emphasis on creating, a community of mathematicians who can be in discourse, with each other. And then for social science and the integration of the arts across that, we are using these inquiry arcs that we created, and the teachers are forming questions that are relevant to their grade levels and their curriculum based on the provocations of people, place, and purpose. But also designing it in a way that is inquiry based. So part of that is, the teacher creating these questions that help to frame the learning, but that also provide opportunity for children to be forming their own questions within that. And so, that's where I think the intrinsic motivation comes from, is where we're having something that we're studying together, but I have the opportunity within that to be asking my own questions and to be pursuing the answers. And then I'm, learning the things that I need to learn in terms of my skill development in literacy or math to be able to access that information, to be able to share my thinking and learning with other people, to be able to understand the ideas of others. And I want to learn that more about that because I'm intellectually engaged in pursuing questions that are interesting to me. And so I want to become a better reader, or I want to be able to write this thing so my friend can understand it, or I want to be able to analyze this graph and this data so that I can further my knowledge. So I think it's this blending always of how are we both providing the structure and how are we drawing out the potential of what children are wondering about simultaneously.
And I would just build on that and say that part of that structure is there's a social aspect to it as well that I think is really motivating for students. And in that there's options within that. Some students really want to work by themselves, and some students really get excited by other questions and working in partnership. And so we have a lot of opportunities for students to co-create. And I think that keeps kids coming back to Zoom every day.
And in person, where we usually are.
And in person.
This is a
That
temporary,
will be back soon.
temporary state.
Yeah.
Wonderful, thank you. That reminds me of that main floor, high ceiling, right? Where they take it is an extended, it's their journey, right? So thank you for that. Okay, another question on a different subject. In this virtual remote reality right now, how are new students getting connected and feeling part of the community?
Mm-hmm. This is challenging, right now for new children who are young to be connecting and making friends with other children, via Zoom. I think that in typical years when we're on campus, our children are really excited about new classmates, and there are so many opportunities for small moments to happen between children. When you're moving between classes, when you're playing outside, when you're at lunch, so many different times when you're able to build those connections. That's more difficult when the time that you can be connecting is, in Zoom. So we are hearing that it's taking, longer to build those connections. And we're working to be really intentional to help children do it. One of the things that just started this week were some optional on-campus activities. So each grade level is having a day a week where they can sign up and come to campus to do some physical activities or arts and crafts and things like that in small groups after school. And the signups were robust and children were excited. And especially, I know families of new children were very excited for their children to have time to be on campus and to connect with classmates, in person. We also had a visit day, right, the first week of school so that classmates could meet each other and see their teachers then. And teachers are working as best they can to use Zoom as a tool where children can be building those connections. So our classes include a lot of time for children to be in smaller groups, for them to still be doing collaborative work together. Teachers are providing, social opportunities. In first grade, they did these small chats kind of over in the afternoon over lunch, where small groups of kids would meet with one of the teachers and the teacher could foster conversation there. In fourth and fifth grade, our counselor, Stephen, he's going to be hosting some lunch sessions there where kids can have more of those happenstance, conversations where you can just talk about, whatever it is a fourth grader is going to talk about with another fourth grader, and not have it be so, teacher directed.
We've also had a few optional offerings on Fridays and dance party. I was hosting a dance party with Stephen, and there were a lot of new students there, and it was really fun to see them choose, opting in for that. And I'll just add to that, my daughter, who is at school, every year they plot and scheme to figure out who the new students are going to be and how they can get to know them. And it's this thrilling opportunity to have an infusion of new people, and they're very sought after, and it's an exciting opportunity to have the community grow. So I feel like that's something that I've witnessed as a parent.
Mm-hmm.
Wonderful, thank you. There's a question specific to what was mentioned earlier in our program about including the community in broader question or broader decision-making practices. And so specifically, how might the parent group or parent and guardian group participate in decision-making or in helping, sort of, the change, not just change or but be a part of the culture of the school, right? So what kind of specific examples would there be for that? This might be a question for you, Tim.
Yeah, I can share a few institutional examples. I think we believe, consistent with our progressive ed principles, that everyone in the community has a voice, and that everyone in the community should be listening to those voices, frankly, whether it's adults or whether it's children, adults to children and vice versa. So, parents and guardians are invited into a pretty robust parent-faculty association, our version of a PTA, and there are a variety of committees and task forces and events and so forth that parents can organize. And those committees are empowered to discuss important ideas at the school, sometimes to make recommendations to the administration or requests of the administration. And so we engage pretty actively with parents that way. We survey all the parents, done on a pretty regular basis, I guess I would say, to get feedback and input. We've been particularly active in these remote months of asking parents how it's working out for their families and their kids, and how can we make improvements to our program. So parent voices are prominent in that way. Parents serve on the board of trustees. Parents are surveyed every spring, all parents in the school, for feedback on programs and their child's experience, on the culture and atmosphere at the school, the level of inclusion at the school, those sorts of things. So, and we regularly, Dawn, I, and Genevieve and Isaac are regularly in conversation with parents about all aspects of the program, not only their child's specific experience, but school policies, broader cultural questions about the school, ideas parents might have. So I think it gets back to that dynamism comment I made. We want this to be an actively engaged community for everyone, and that always includes parents and guardians.
Great, thank you, Tim. One last question before I talk about events that are coming up later in October is about how we not just have citizens teach about the US, but actually have citizens of the world, global citizens, and how that can begin in the lower school and the beginning school. So I guess this would be for Dawn and maybe Genevieve.
Well, and I think it starts in preschool,
Yeah.
and I'm going to start by repeating a little bit what I said before, because I really think that that being a global citizen begins by being able to be in relationship with people who are similar to and different from yourself, and being open to seeing those different perspectives and learning early how to start to develop empathy and to be able to see the perspectives from others. And, I think it continues in the way that teachers are really intentional about asking questions like, whose story is being heard and whose story is missing? What voices are we not hearing right now? And because that then causes you to seek to look further than yourself and to look, beyond your community and beyond, I think the question here is beyond the United States, to understand what is the perspective from people who are living in other places of the world. What can I learn from that perspective that will help inform me for, where I am. So that continual perspective taking and that continual asking of like, who are we hearing from and who are we not hearing from, begins by understanding that reality in your preschool, community meeting conversation of like, so who
Yes.
are we hearing from? Who are we not hearing from? What story is missing right now? What do we need to find out? Because if you develop that as a thinking routine as a person, then it starts to extrapolate as your view in the world can start to get wider, and you have awareness of what is existing beyond your immediate community.
Wonderful, thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you for participating in this Q&A, panelists. I really appreciate it. We're going to be wrapping up now, and I want to thank all of the attendees for joining us this evening. And we have more events in October, and this is that are the ones that are specific to the beginning and lower school. All happen on Thursdays. And next week it's Meet the Beginning and Lower School faculty from 4 to 5 p.m. And that will be a chance to hear from the teachers and from our learning specialist, from different specialist teachers. And then the week after that is Meet Students and Families to hear from community members and their experience at Catlin Gable. And that's October 22nd from 4 to 5 p.m. And then how do we foster community? And how do we, who are we as a school? And how do we have, families who come from all over the metro area, and how do we, pride ourselves in being a community school and fostering that? And that's October 29th from 6:30 to 7:30 p.m. And all these events can be registered in the admission portal, and there's more events as well. And you can look at those in the website and register there. So thank you all so much for attending, and we wish you a wonderful evening. Good night.
Night.
Good night.